Thank God for that.
I mean, yeah. As I said,
easy.
you do have many podcasts and videos to listen to, don't you? I've listened to like 1 or 2 maybe, but I mean,
I listened to Mahone's because it's much more of an opinion style piece. And I believe a number of the others will be an outlining piece with maybe some opinion thrown in, due to the length of them and the speed of them coming out. My one is intending to be both, so it's taking me a bit longer.
How lengthy will it be? How much time are your fans dedicating to listening to the Omnipoke, and how much are you putting it behind a Metafy class?
So many opinions will have to be edited out as well, and.
I mean, I'm still formulating my complete thoughts, as I think is probably the right thing to do.
Sure.
I think there are some absolute home runs that you can't debate, are just very positive, but there are some things that are more debatable. So I'm trying to put the pros and cons up for those, and I'm sure we'll hash some of those out today. And hopefully it'll help me formulate my opinions more as well, as we are probably going to have different opinions on different things.
Yeah, I saw your X post get, like, it was a very varied reception.
So there's so much to consider, from like the region that someone's from and their like experience with the game and this, that, and the other. So obviously I haven't all like taken in every human's perspective. I literally said these are my initial thoughts. So yeah, I mean naturally there's gonna be a lot of replies immediately on X, and I think already different people's opinions will be changing because of other posts and this, that, and the other. So joining the conversation is completely fine, and like I welcome it, obviously.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of opinions and views, and everyone's like you kind of just said, they'll keep changing opinions. But I think this is probably a good segue point into actually welcoming back everyone to our SpilltheTeaCG podcast. It's myself, Alex, joined by Joe and our Benjamin Rabaiotti, of course. And off the back of a very eventful day, and even last couple of days. I'm actually going to go straight to Ben first, because I really do think Ben needs to have a nice conversation with myself and Joe. Just context, no real details, but he has left our chat, the scum.
I left the lads' chat. I couldn't handle it, all right? I had a bad day. Deal with it. I think the people don't know the real... I say people don't know the real Joe and Alex, but there's a different side. There's a different side to both of you when you're close mates with these two. Honestly, it's a roller coaster ride.
You asked for help. We gave you help, and then you got angry at us, which is weird.
I couldn't handle it for one day, and all of a sudden I got kicked out of the chat.
Despite us both helping you. You blame us, in a way, for your mistakes.
There's different ways of helping. There's helping, like...
So us helping you avoid jail is our fault.
Right.
This is
Rab,
news.
Rab,
This is incredible.
It's just one sentence you need to say, and we'll bring you back
jail
in, okay?
was actually possible.
Right, okay, I'm sorry.
As an outcome.
Sorry, who?
So
say that
I'd love to say apology accepted, but was there an apology? Is my question.
Yeah, I didn't. It didn't really come from the heart.
We'll have to take this offline.
Alex, I think it's still going to be a 2-person chat for a while. And
2 caster-teers.
Yeah, 2 caster-teers is so much better than 3 caster-teers. It's been flourishing since.
Flourishing.
Yeah, it's been popping off with all the information that's been covered out. I mean, we'd actually have intelligent conversations.
I'm editing this, by the way. So like,
it's like the future meme where it's like if Rav wasn't in the chat, and it's like everything's 300 years in the future.
Honestly, what would happen? This would be the reality if Rav wasn't in the chat.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
And it's some sort of like medieval slum if it's when I'm in the chat.
And honestly, I won't be inviting you back to that chat until you come with a sincere apology about how you acted.
And
as a grown man to leave a group chat for some sort of like impact or like I don't really know what it was, but for an adult to do that, it's really pathetic. So that's
have that what you will, Benjamin.
And you need to know that your actions do have consequences, which I think is important, because by the way you act, it doesn't seem like you actually grasp that concept.
Ben,
that
I
you
need
should have
I need-
grasped from like being a
Benjamin,
toddler.
Ben,
I mean,
Benjamin,
I don't-
I need you back because Joe scares me
need-
when I'm alone with
Yeah, I know exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. It's your next, man.
Alex knows there's
Alex
no
is
one
next,
else
though.
who could be in the firing line but
Alex
him now.
Alex is next. Yeah, he's the only target in that chat, right? Like,
It's
So-
scary, I'm not gonna lie.
Rab, you were Alex's bulletproof vest.
yeah. And now it's like, I mean, this is classic, right? I'd really like to get into this point. When we started the podcast, right, it was Alex's idea to start the podcast. I wanted to start doing videos and stuff, and then Alex was like, let's do a podcast. Anyway, I end up doing like all of the editing, all of the technical stuff, and then I get the brunt of it when it goes wrong.
To be clear, this isn't why you left the group chat.
Right, yeah, moving on from now.
Move
okay,
on.
look,
Move on.
you've apologised, we probably
Why
need a bit
did you?
more. But today, big news had dropped. Of course, we are talking about the Pokemon 2025 season that's coming up. That's actually kicking off in only a few days' time. We had a lot of information drop, and I think there's going to be a lot to cover here. So, just to kind of give a little bit of context, this is all around the structure of our, competitive seasons across all 3 games. There's been a lot of changes. I just want to quickly, before we go into actually any details, first thoughts from both of you. Let's go Benjamin first.
When you
How
say
did you
first
feel
thoughts.
when you first instinctive thought, as soon as you saw everything drop, your quick glance of the information? I know you haven't read it, so...
That's such a lie. Honestly, I missed one thing before we started this podcast, and then all of a sudden this Joe's like, you didn't read any of it, did you? You didn't read any of it, honestly.
That's not why I
Ridiculous.
asked, by the way. But
Yeah,
moving on.
it's not what you asked,
opinion? Do you have an
my,
opinion?
My
or-
opinion, I have different opinions on the different changes, the different individual
You
changes.
sound
But
like
I think
such a
overall,
consultant.
though, I am happy with the changes. I think that's the way I could summarize it.
All right, happy it is. Joe, anything to expand on, I guess?
My first thing to say is just like an applause to TCG for being so upfront with this communication and so early on this communication, because there's been seasons in the past where it's taken a lot longer to receive all of this wave of info. So just straight away, knowing the IC dates in 2025 already and the location and everything, that's like a huge win. And I think there's a lot of big wins in the structure, which makes me think that there really are like genuinely caring a lot for our player base. There are some more debatable things here that we'll get into, I'm sure, as we like sort of go through it with a fine-tooth comb. But I think there's some unquestionably like amazing forward-thinking decisions in here, and there are some like logistical and budgetary like things that have had to change in order to incorporate some of these changes. Or just so that they can keep a greater control on like a growing community. So there's some things that we almost have to concede the fact that like the game's grown to a size where some of these things, whether they're good or bad, just had to happen so that they could logistically function. So that's like my pinch of salt and my initial reaction.
Yeah, I mean, likewise, I carry the same or very similar sentiment. There's a lot of very positive news. I mean, we've discussed it in a previous podcast about where we think kind of this world's qualification could go to, or what else could come into the actual structure of our sort of play Pokemon across the games in reality. But we're mainly focusing on a TCG. I think there's a lot of welcome points, and so far, I mean, there's obviously caveats to each of sort of the major sort of themes that we're going to cross over shortly. But for now, I'm generally pleased, and it's always very interesting reading the online sort of response. Again, a lot of people probably talking with a lot of emotion, not a chance to maybe sometimes digest it as well, and there's going to be a lot of opinions out there. And what we're doing in this pod is going to hopefully try and give a bit of an opinion as well. But hopefully, Benjamin is toying around with his scenes.
Yeah.
I have no idea, but we just hear clicking in the background, which is quite
I
amusing.
can go back to the scene.
You can
I
do
thought,
whatever you want.
I thought he was doing the little T-Rex jumping over cactuses.
Yeah, the little, yeah. Of course.
I imagine the little cube
I-
that jumps
I'm-
over
I'm
the
actually-
cube walls.
I'm actually really looking forward to the edit because I don't know whether this the scene was up the entire time, but we'll have to see.
Incredible.
Once I edit.
I mean, that's fine. That's fine too.
I mean, it's all
it's
all
only
very
our
helpful.
faces. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless unless you're, showcasing, some secret chats with.
No.
Yeah. So I mean, the biggest thing that we can touch on, and it's pretty much the first point that's actually on that webpage. We'll link it into our video below as well on YouTube. So if anyone wants to quickly click on that, but it is on the Pokemon.com website. But it's the World's Championships qualification update, and simply it's set by these first two lines. The qualification system for the Pokemon World Championships is changing for the 2025 season. In 2025, a set number of players from each rating zone, age, division, and game will earn an invitation to the World Championships based on their championship points leaderboard standings. So, I mean, hopefully Ben's got it up there, but just to kind of run you through. Ben, go ahead, since you've got it.
Well, I can put it to the specific amount on TCG Championship invitations for each region. But I think this was a welcome change. I think we discussed this before when we were having the kind of elitism world's invite kind of conversation. And I think this is come at a really good time. I think this is Pokemon basically moderating the amount of invites that they can give out and keeping a close eye on it, obviously. If they're going to set a specific amount of invites that they're allowed, it's obviously keeping players in check, how many players are going to be able to get their invites, and they will be able to obviously, control their world championships a little more closely in terms of venues, and also just in general with the obviously with the game growing as it is at the moment, there will be naturally more and more people getting their world's invites, and I don't think that can necessarily be managed effectively, because you will end up with a worlds with, if it was going the way it was, there's nothing to say that you'd get worlds invitations in the thousands, right, across all of the different regions. And I think 125 is a real sweet spot. Other games I can't really speak for. Other games have seemed pretty rough actually. In terms of VGC, but in terms of TCG, though, I think it's an appropriate amount, and I think before I would be lying or being hypocritical if I said that this wouldn't be a welcome change, because I was a big advocate for having a more exclusive worlds, right? And I think overall, I think people do want that, and for the casual player base, I can see why. And people who are looking to achieve their first worlds invites and things like that, I can understand the disappointment, but I think this was a change that had to happen eventually.
Yeah, so I guess just to kind of recap, I mean, like I said, it might be on the screen already, but for those who might be listening on other podcasts, US and Canada, as well as Europe, for the Masters, it's 125 in the standings. That will get an invite. So based on your championship points, the top 125 will be receiving an invite to the Pokemon World Championships. Seniors is 100 in both of those regions, and 75 in the junior region, in the junior age range. Latin America is 100 in Masters, 50 and 50 in juniors and seniors. Oceania is only 20 in the Masters, 10 and 10 in the junior and senior divisions. And then the Middle East and South Africa, 10 in the Masters, 5 in seniors, 5 in juniors. Joe, your first thoughts and sort of views on this kind of area?
I definitely share the sentiment with Rab that this is, like, in terms of the why, this isn't they've done it to make a more, stringent worlds. This is a logistical reason. No doubt in my mind that it's so they can keep control on how many people are physically going to be attending this event, when this Worlds in 2024 is going to be the most attended World despite the threshold being raised from the previous season. So that shows that with a game growing or even staying the same at this point, Worlds has too many players, essentially. So this is a very easy way, whilst also being very transparent with all the players at the beginning of the season, who's going to make Worlds and who isn't in terms of the sheer number of people going to be there. Because there has been seasons gone by where a threshold has been lowered, for example, midway through a season in terms of championship points, and being part of those things, usually lowering is a better feeling than certainly raising a bar, because I think you could basically never raise a bar. I think there would be absolute outrage if a bar was ever raised of championship points. But with numbers changing each season, it's so much harder to say, like, here's a cutoff for everyone. We hope this is enough from our calculations, because clearly, like, over the last 2 or 3 seasons, it's been impossible to manage. But, like, there are genuine cons to a top X rather than just a threshold. I think from a feeling standpoint, having this sort of like cutthroat mentality where everyone around you is actually your enemy and not your friend anymore, and the fact that you're in a car with 3 people that got more points than you, now you don't like them as much and you can't really share in their accomplishment, is so weird and like against the usual spirit of the game that Pokemon has done really well to like create that culture of. And also I think for those players who will be chasing top X, there's also this like potential anxiety induced by not being in complete control of your own fate, which I think is really frustrating, in that you're constantly going to not only have to worry about like how you perform at these tournaments, you're constantly having to worry about how everyone else is performing in these tournaments. And like, you know, 200 tables down, you're frustrated that someone didn't play perfectly because it meant that this guy got 3 more match points in one regional, is such a bizarre thing to think about. So there are genuine downsides to a top X. I think this is definitely like the logistical reason. I think OC can feel very aggrieved by this. I think percentage-wise, 20 is not a lot of players. And honestly, there are probably 20 OC players that are traveling quite a bit. So this is probably the most tough one. So from that region, I definitely understand the hurt. For the other regions, just for comparison, this year going into Worlds, there were 271 NA Masters going to Worlds, 298 EU and 299 LATAM. So percentage-wise, LATAM is also a little bit aggrieved that they're not in the same band as NA and EU. Again, just on like raw numbers, it doesn't make that much sense, I suppose. But this could also just be down to opportunity of like points, like their point acquisition is so different to EU and NA that it may be TPCI just saying that it should be treated differently from those regions, which just has simply way more opportunities to earn points. So those are my sort of main takes right now. I don't know if there are any other like big cons you can think of for this top X versus just a bar.
I mean, worry. I worry. Oh, sorry, Karen.
No, go ahead. If you said you got to worry.
I worry about the player experience. Joe alluded to it there.
At Worlds or at tournaments in the season?
The run-up. The kind
of
throughout the season, you mean?
Yeah, going for your invite. I think the player experience. I worry about the player experience in terms of this cutthroat mentality. I mean, we know how stressful it can be for a top 22 chase, right? And I think that we can definitely compare that to this now. And, you know, this is throughout the entire season, whereas before you had with a CP invite, you could make your 500 points and there you go, I'm done. I'm safe. I'm happy. Mm-hmm. I'll wait for my email to come in June. But whereas now, nobody's confirmed an invite until June, you know? And it could, I saw a very good tweet from Lucian,
I was going to mention the same one.
Who said, you know, say if I can't get to NAIC, with this new system, there's nothing stopping, you know, so many people from EU getting to NAIC and capturing those last few points, because, and I'm sure we'll get to it, the best finish limits have also been altered as well, and internationals are now so much more OP than they used to be. Even though they were so good before, they're even better now.
I don't think that's accurate, but we'll get back to that.
We'll come to that.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay. But you know, losing your invite in late June because somebody has happened to go to a tournament over you really does feel bad. But again, I think I can understand the frustrations and the disappointments that people would have in this new system, but I feel like it's an adjustment that had to be made.
One thing I do want to mention that Pokemon could really just improve this mentality if the leaderboards are updated to show a split between like local CP earned per player as well as regional and IC CP per player, and be more transparent about the finishes they've already had. Because if that's all more public information rather than like friendship group spreadsheet math.
Yes.
Like I think that could be a huge dub as
I
well.
would-
So as long as that is communicated effectively to all the players, that will also make the feeling of this season so much better. By the
I
way,
do not think there is one person who wouldn't welcome a much better leaderboard structure that they have at the moment. And I couldn't
you can see a lot of information, but it's like
Yeah.
how much you're willing to dig.
Yeah. You need to dig for the specific information, and also, I mean, locals are updated based on locals, right? But it has, if you can make it as snappier and as up to date as possible, so people can track in the the 6th of June or whenever it is that the last regional is. I'm sure a lot of sweat will be spared. But yeah, sorry, Dow, I interrupted you.
No, absolutely fine. I mean, it feels like this is obviously getting to a much more serious conversation as Ben takes a swig of his beer.
0%.
To be fair, I was actually I went to my fridge to grab a can of Coke, and like the only other thing in there is like beer, and I don't really drink beer, but I was just like, is that appropriate for the pod?
I'm all over
this.
it. I'm all over the 0%. The 0%'s great. It's so good.
Is it? I mean, yeah, okay.
I only get the
Moving
sweet.
on.
You get the sweet taste of beer, but no lagginess.
Sweet taste
Great.
of beer is not something I've ever put in a sentence in my
Yeah.
lifetime.
Anyway.
Yeah, okay, so based on the numbers, we're seeing like what, it was roughly like 60% or so loss in terms of invites that we've had from this season to next season, right? I will fall back again, and I'll reiterate the point from my side. I don't want to see it as elitism, but I do want to see Worlds as that exclusive event. You know, when I first joined the game, I'll reiterate the point, the fact that I saw it as people in the limelights that I wanted to be like and wanted to compete with them, and the opportunity in those early Worlds with the high thresholds and so on, and sort of the different type of structure that we had, meant it was a little bit more difficult in some way, shape, or form. And now we're getting back to that stage where potentially it's difficult again. But as Joe said, it's all about that control element. I think Pokemon have just let the reins go a bit too wild for the last few years, maybe even a bit further, in all honesty, because they used to have a more exclusive Worlds. They used to have then the LCQ to bump up the numbers to a certain number for them to be able to control a tournament structure. And that's where I think Pokemon would like to just wrangle or wrestle that kind of control back. Like I said, I think it's a welcome change. Oceania, I feel really bad for, because they're taking a massive hit. I think they had it like, what was it, 120 invites?
125.
125, yeah.
Oh,
So
was
I
it
mean,
that
down
high?
to 20.
That's a
is-
big hit.
is-
Yeah.
That's
is
huge,
crazy.
yeah.
So good luck to the 10 people that we don't typically see on the world stage often. Or is it
Am I the only one that thinks it's like quite liberating as a player now going into 2025, just accepting that an invite is not going to be for me personally? Because I feel like
Yes.
the mentality I've heard is that like, I can't get an invite, what's the point of me playing? Whereas I'm like, I don't have the stress of an invite. I can just take every tournament that I attend as like a fun experience, and let's see what happens and let's make the most of it. Because like, I genuinely just feel like liberated now that there's not going to be pressure. Like, there's still pressure to do well because there's so much on the line for regionals, but it's not like my year's on the line. If I like, why have I booked Hawaii
You
3
mean how
months
I
before
was
when
at
I can't
NAOC?
actually do it? Literally, like, you were not in a good mental place
No,
before the tournament,
I didn't
right?
enjoy it at all.
You were fortunate in having the elation, but if you were like 2-4 or whatever and just drop, it's like you'd be in the gutter. So I actually think this will be liberating to so many like invite rat racers year to year that have to play every tournament in the season. Now we can just like wait and see on the thing that we'll get onto next, which is still a championship reward system. See how that is, see what takes your fancy, play how much you want to. I think that's like going to liberate so many competitive casual players who have made invites in the past or come very close to invites in the past, feel they should be a Worlds invite player, and that's their bar every year, despite the difficulty changing each year and the fact that you then can like go broke going to 10 or 15 tournaments just because you want to maintain the I'm a Worlds player. I think it's been such a toxic mentality around the World Championships for so long, and the next point that we'll get to, I think, the Championship Point Season Reward Program, which essentially is like the old system, but rather than a bar, it's a ladder. I think that is going to be such a better feeling for the game. And I'm personally like, as someone who didn't get Worlds this year, I'm looking at 2025, never expecting to get to Worlds, even though I'll attempt to go to like a decent number of ICs and regionals. I'm just going in with this like newfound positivity of like, let the chasers chase. I'm just here to enjoy my tournaments now. Like, I feel so different about.
I guess
now that we've had these dates, like I'm going in with a completely different perspective now. I think.
Yeah,
I agree.
I know Ben's got something to say there as well, but I guess
No,
from my side, just very quickly, I'm not there yet. I mean, I think because I'm not used to, but so had the opportunity to play at Worlds on a fairly regular basis, on a regular basis, in a fortunate position to do so. My mindset has always been, and maybe it's changed because circumstances changed, family, life in general, but my circumstances, I've always wanted to hit that bar. That was always my goal. What I've always championed for, and I think I've said it on this podcast as well, is that how the tournament structures nowadays have changed so much that internationals are mini worlds in themselves. Yes, the only maybe other downside to that is the fact that we're going back to the same locations, back again and again and again, but they do so much for the player base nowadays that it's a draw in its own right. That's why we still have massive numbers, or we have had massive numbers for those kind of tournaments. We saw record numbers for LAIC, EUIC, and NAIC, and for a lot of people don't sort of put that into perspective enough. I think I will get to that stage that you're at, Joe.
I didn't qualify this year, so I've already had the but, getting over it weeks, I guess.
I mean, it's a very odd one, right? Because obviously there's a lot of us in our friendship group that see you as a very high level competitor, and yeah, maybe you might have made one or two odd decisions about decks and so on, and it just didn't go right this season, for example. But to get to that stage, I think it's specifically also for us because we're casters and we don't get to play in every tournament as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like we've spoken about it before, it was a grind for me to even try and attempt to get there this season. So, yeah, there's a lot of positives to take from that, and I think, I mean, it wasn't on the list, but I think we should touch on that championship points reward program next, because I think that's a massive positive that's going to come out of this as well, and you've kind of already touched on it. Ben, just very quickly, I know you had something to say as well.
No, yeah, I mean, I've never been a fan of the toxic mentality around Worlds. I feel like a lot of the community put this World Championships invite as one of the only achievements that you can make in Pokemon, and I think it's completely wrong. And I feel like a lot of people go in with the expectation of, oh, I'm a good player, I'm all right, I should be going for my Worlds invite. No, like that's not the only achievement you can make. You can be perfectly happy with your season with a couple of League Cups, a couple of top eights, and a day 2 1 regional. That's fine. That's perfectly fine, and you should enjoy it. I feel like the achievement should be, have I enjoyed my year playing Pokemon? I don't think it should ever. It should never be.
Yes.
It should never be. I didn't make my Worlds invite, so therefore I can't sleep for a month. And
my year's wasted.
My year's wasted.
I think it's
ridiculous.
Because I think it's because we've been. So I just to add to that point, I think it's because we've been very privileged in the fact that we've had so many people get invites for the past few years.
Yeah.
Right? It just makes it seem so attainable for everyone to reach to that goal. And I completely get it. And it was like, X person's been able to do it. They've only been playing a year. They've only been playing a couple of years. You know what that basically means? If I go hard next year, I can do it too. You still can. But I think it's just the fact that sometimes we need to put things into perspective. We have those challenges, we have those cups, we have those regionals, we have those ICs. I mean, if you want to go play at Worlds, try and win a regional. It's kind of these kind of things that we could try and attain for. It's those kind of levels.
I think these changes are going to hard stop that mentality and that expectation. I think you're going to put strong holds it's either impossible or you can go for it. More than happy to. But on the flip side, as I said before, the experience of the people who are going for their invite may not be fantastic because of the stresses of having to continuously top up and keep an eye on those leaderboards, at 12 o'clock whilst you're in work, I'm sure. But, I'm just very happy that this change has been made because I'm hoping that the mentality can finally get off everybody's shoulders. And like Joe said, I feel like people can play the game happily now. Hopefully,
Joe may finally be able to just see top tier, high quality Pokemon at the World Championships on streams and so on.
That is my dream, bro. That is my, and I think the players who do achieve that, like you said, Alex, will feel that insane sense of achievement.
Yeah.
They're not just walking around another venue, like in a different city they've not been to, which is like all the cool things of Worlds, but it's not just all the people you saw at every other event anyway. You know, there's like with this lack of exclusivity, like. Don't get me wrong, I didn't get my invite, so like there's still a bar that you have to hit of being competent and go to enough things. So like I'm being facetious in that you're seeing everyone there, but you see such a high portion of players. Now we're actually separating the like very competent, strong, dedicated player base from the competitive casual, which is just a fine thing to be. And I fit right into that category now, and I'm so happy being in that role now.
I'm going to do my best to drag you straight back out of that, by the way.
Like, don't get me wrong, I'm gonna go into every tournament trying to win it, and I'm gonna put in the sweaty hours. Don't worry about that. But
yeah, very true.
Like, I'm not gonna value my self-worth on an invite or not an invite this year, and I feel like genuinely people do that who are very committed to Pokemon, and I think it's completely toxic and wrong.
And you see those people on X now who are raging at this change. You know,
I feel like it's
never
because
gonna get a Worlds invite and stuff like
that's
that.
what it is, right? There's people.
But
It's people who had a goal and those goalposts have shifted, or it's people like Alex who have had something and are effectively losing something because it's so much more difficult now, right? So I get it. Like you're missing out on experiences that you've really enjoyed in the past, or an experience you were hoping to achieve, and it's become more difficult. So I get the outrage and the sadness, but there's more to life than just playing in one more tournament in a year. It's there is only one event in a year which is gatekept by a points barrier or whatever X barrier. You can still enjoy every other tournament that you attend. So this is already one of the most open platforms to play the TCG in a competitive environment, compared to everything else. So I don't get that complaint too much. Like we're already so welcoming, and the ICs are still those celebrations of Pokemon. And I think actually more so now, with Worlds becoming more exclusive, the ICs themselves will be that celebration that we're always looking for at the World Championships every year. And I think it's just going to be a mentality shift around the invite. The only thing that I do think is bad is that I don't know what I'm going to ask my opponents before each round now, because I can't ask, are you going for your invite?
That's the biggest loss.
You can't have a conversation with your opponent. It's
going to be pure silence now.
No.
I'm going to go, are you? And then I'll stop and I'll have nothing to say.
Think about when
no Riz Joe. Is that
think about when we're casting though now. You can, it's kind of like there's so much more excitement about a top 125 race than kind of.
There's going to be.
He needs 15 more CP to get his invite.
It's going to be really specifically like players pairing against each other now. Like the pairings themselves will be so much more relevant.
It means so much more.
Storylines.
That's also interesting.
Storylines. Think of this.
We have so much more to get through though.
Sorry, we banged on about this quite long, but for good reason, because it's the natural biggest change that we've got.
That's the headline.
Like I said, Joe, I'll give you a minute now because this is something you're quite passionate about and you've already mentioned it a little bit. But this paragraph, which a lot of people have maybe just glossed over because they just go straight to the table. But there is something important that's coming, which is the Championship Points Season Reward Program. And it's something we championed for before, but I know we don't have much information right now, but what are we expecting here, Joe?
In the perfect world, think about the old system of championship points as a certain threshold, but instead of one threshold for the entire season and it's Worlds or not Worlds, now there will be those championship point thresholds, but it goes to like 150 points, 300 points, 450 points, 600 points. I'm throwing these bars out there as just a whatever, but then at those different levels, you get a pack of promos, extra like league packs, sleeves, short boosters, whatever, plushies. These things that we could have got in our Worlds kits now could be divvied up to different bars of a Worlds ladder, and it's a real shame that we didn't they didn't tell us the points season, what's it called, Championship Points Season Reward Program. If that was more transparent and they had shown us, even parts of that, or like a distribution of that, or what it was going to look like, I think there would be a lot less outrage about this Worlds thing. Because I believe now that for the casual competitive player, there's going to be still a bar that we will all be hoping to hit so that we get these things sent to us in July, you know? I think I could be like a plushie chaser, you know what I mean? Like if I just hit a certain amount of points, and that sounds like a meme, but going to Worlds, half of the reason you want to go to Worlds is to get the bag, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
So get the swag. So now
plushie qualifier.
So now each year we'll have these incentives, but also like Jiminy Billy Bob, who goes to goes to every League Cup in their quarter, they can get to like 200. Well, what can they get? They can get 260 championship points max from locals. Let's say they get 150 from locals, and they never even attend a regional, or they never attend an IC. They now get stuff, and they wouldn't get stuff in the past. And look at me and Rab. We got a certain amount of championship points. It meant nothing at the end of the season because you didn't get your invite. Now we could still get sent some cool things to be an acknowledgement of like, you're a dedicated player that goes to stuff and can do well like occasionally. Here, have this, and it's like only an addition to what we have already have already received from League Cups and from challenges and from regionals. So it's like Pokemon are giving us more stuff. The pricing has increased just by having this bar. Now, I'm being very optimistic. I feel like it will be sweet, and I think it could be salvation for a lot of players. And maybe I'm too bullish on that side, but I think the potential here is so incredible for giving us literal, physical, tangible rewards to make us go to 2 more cups at the end of the season, make us go to 1 more regional, even if an invite is gone. Because I think the drop-off for locals and for regionals and special events, we see it every year. As those players either achieve an invite or realise they can't achieve an invite, drops off entirely. But now having these smaller increments means there'll be people playing just for those extra 30 to push them over. Still a bar, but there's so many more increments that it means that all these players will still be active players. I think it's like probably a bigger win than it's definitely a bigger win from going from top X to a threshold to qualify, because now these thresholds are going to be much more fluid, and it means that the player base will just remain way more active. So I'm super happy about this, and essentially this paragraph was why I was so hyped in my tweets and why I thought it was like the best thing, because I think this generally is just amazing. This is a huge win for casuals, competitive players, everyone. I think there's just no losing with this, provided there is enough points. So I've really spilled on everything there, but if there's any other things to say on it, just go for it now.
No, I think that's the biggest key thing is it's almost that inclusivity for everyone to be involved, right? All the way from young players who maybe their parents can't take them to regionals or ICs, as you kind of mentioned. So, but they get rewarded with something. It's very akin to, you know, I don't know if Ben played, maybe Joe, you did, but when we had the play points rewards, I think it was 2013, 2014 might have been the last one. But when you got enough play points, well, one, if you had enough play points, you get to play nationals. But if you then accumulated a certain number of play points through leagues, battle roads, they weren't cities before, were they? There were cities before, you get rewarded with play point promos, which were really cool. Player reward promos were fantastic, and just gave you a little bit more to sort of strive for. I guess there's probably not much else to say on that topic. We'll wait for more information. Just on this whole CP dynamic, I think we've had CP now, again, this is my little bit of research, for 12 years. The last time we haven't utilised championship points as our invite structure was, Benjamin, can you make a guess?
No.
Joe, do you know?
It was way before my time.
Where were we, or what worlds it was?
What worlds?
Was it, would that be Toronto, or would it be a Boston, maybe?
We haven't had a Toronto World.
Was it a Vancouver?
There was a Vancouver.
Was it a
World,
Vancouver? Vancouver is what I'm thinking of. The
last Hawaii was a...
there you go. Okay.
Points, but in 2011 San Diego we used that Premier rating with ELO as our invite structure, which was at the time the top X players, right? Because it was, instead of championship points, it was based on ELO, which is still tracked in our Play Pokemon pages if people dig hard enough. But some really cool information.
Don't ask me for mine.
It might be interesting. I actually was digging around for it the other day and found mine eventually, and it's all right. I can't complain, but yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. All right, moving on. Other things that sort of factor into our invite structure and this kind of potential rewards program. We have seen points increase across ICs and regionals.
Yes.
Hopefully Ben is actually also tracking to those points
on it.
as well. That table pretty much straight under. There's a lot more points on offer now. At the bottom end as well is what we're starting to see. Maybe some of it converge a bit closer than what we have previously seen in previous seasons, I believe, because you used to get like loads more for ICs than regionals. It's still a good chunk more at the international level. It's drastically high for what first, second, third, first, second, top 4, top 8. And then it drops off by 200 straight down to top 16. So 750 first, 700, 650, 600, 400, 350. You can read it on the screen. Regionals, again, it's been bumped up to the 350. I guess we'll touch on the points increase as well, but also staring at in our face is that BFL number, which is 6. And there is no line in between that regional and special events.
It's confirmed. It's confirmed.
It's been confirmed? Amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
So super interesting, because we've also been people, I think, who have championed special finish limits kind of coming down, or at least be factored into the invite system. Joe, I know you're going to talk about it a lot on your own video from a very straightforward place, but in the first initial views here, I mean, we're happy, right? This is what we wanted. It kind of doesn't force everyone to have to keep pushing through for every single tournament. I think there's a lot of still mindset of that you need to go to every international, which I think isn't the case anymore. So this is what Ben mentioned, that there's sort of a higher impetus on it. But my personal view is you can actually do well enough at regionals or special events and still just go to that one international in your region, simply because, one, they've converged the points to be a little bit closer. Especially at the bottom end, a lot of people used to go for the top 128s, the top 256s for the 180 points. Well, there's only a 60-point difference now in some places. So I think it's a fantastic change, and it's very welcomed from my perspective, considering the amount I get to play as well.
Yeah, I think not only the percentage increases not even across the board, the percentage increases for both regionals and internats are higher towards the top end. So we're weighting point earnings towards the top end, which means the better players with the better finishes get the better rewards, which I think is way better just as a feeling, because it means the best players are actually getting rewarded at these tournaments rather than someone who can just go to 12, And obviously there are going to be those people that still have that incentive to go to a lot because you want to make the most out of your just 6 finishes. And that combines ICs and regionals. This is the biggest thing that I think is kind of a misconception. Like you said, Alex, ICs undoubtedly busted by sheer point payout, but because going to an IC basically scraps one of your regional finishes, right? So someone who doesn't attend LATAM can still go to an NA regional and still earn, like a top 64 finish still gets you 100 points. Whereas previously, they were separate. So someone could attend all 3 ICs, get all of those points, and if you don't go to it, you get 0. You get a big fat 0. But now, if you get a extra regional placement in there, that can offset the earnings that someone else got now. So, Rab, do you understand how that's
I
different
get it.
now?
It's the mentality of stick or twist, though, that I
agree,
because
and
I think that people who are going for invites, we spoke about the kind of stresses and the wanting to go to more, and increasing that top 64 into a 32. I think that mentality will still be there for the people who are going for their invites, and I still feel, but I don't. Thinking about it, though, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think that the people who are going for the top 125 should be at every regional anyway. But I think that people who are going, I'm just going to go to 6 here and I'm just going to see how I do, that's perfectly fine. I think in a perfect world, yes. I don't like to have the mentality of the person with the biggest wallet is obviously going to qualify because they have more tournaments to go to on average.
Well, surely that was the case more last season anyway.
But when, I know, that's what I mean. When wasn't that the case anyway? But
yes.
I think that dampens that down a little bit more, just that little bit more. But I think for the top 125, I would be pretty upset if I was a Worlds chaser and I went to a regional and didn't get anything and still got this top 128.
But it's not like you're not going to get anything because of the points thing anyway.
No, it's not like you're not going to get anything. And
points are always going to mean something now.
I do think this system, again, I would be hypocritical if I said I wasn't happy with it, because at the end of the day, like you said, the players who are achieving the most, who are getting the top placements, will end up getting that top 125 anyway.
So yeah, like effectively the BFL is effectively lower because we're combining ICs and regionals. So the very best players can get away with attending less tournaments, I would say, right? Because on average they're going to have higher placements.
Yeah.
So they can very realistically, between ICs and regionals, attend like 10 in a season now, for example, to feel pretty good about their chances of being in the top 125 if they're very, very competent players. But also like good dedicated players can still make it in by doing I'm going to as many as possible and hoping to just squeak out enough. So I think there's going to be that like incentive to still go to lots of tournaments for like good and aspiring players compared to the very best in the world, who still may go to a ton of tournaments because it's fun anyway and they can earn the most anyway. So like I don't see a problem here. And also, we should also just quickly mention that the BFLs have also decreased for locals. It's gone from 6 to 4 in both cups and challenges. So instead of a max of 390, you can get a max of 260 now. And because additionally regional and IC payouts have increased, effectively local, like the meaning of local points has also effectively decreased, right? Because the more you can earn from these other ones. And I think that's a balance that everyone once again welcomes, because I've heard top 22 chasers and even just invite chasers having to go to like 10 plus cups plus 10 plus challenges just to help hit a bar. And now I think that like you can go again, especially local events, for very high level players, you should not have to go to more than like 10, I would say, to get 4 BFLs. Like even aspiring players to get a top 125 in your region or whatever should attend like 10 probably max, I think, unless you're still chasing championship points for a non-worlds based reason, which is fine as well. So that would be, I again think like this lower BFL helps the rat race of I need to attend everything, and still rewards a combination of the very best as well as the most dedicated, aspiring and good players. So I think they've got it spot on again. I think that's again a positive change from my outlook.
Big claims there, Joe.
The only question I would raise is, do you both think that they should have maybe thought, do we attach a best finish limit to internationals specifically to 1 or 2?
No, I think it's better to combine. Combining is better in my opinion. Because you can offset. You are offsetting points.
You're detracting away a regional was actually quite an interesting dynamic, which
having a BFL for internats is actually the thing you don't want at all, because you want the very best going to make these the most amazing shows possible. And for those who will never get to Worlds, you will still be seeing the best players there, and these can be individual celebrations of Pokemon. It's actually actively bad for them to have any best finish limit, but this is an elegant solution for those who can't attend ICs. You know, there's going to be people who just have never been to LATAM and never plan on going because of their work circumstances or money or whatever else it is, right? And will only ever go to their one IC. This is much more forgiving for them, I think, than it has been in the past.
I mean, looking at the so the top 125 when I looked at it this morning when this announcement came out was 552.
Are you talking about championship points?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is this for Europe?
Yeah, for Europe. Yeah, I don't think that person would have attended 2 internationals anyway. I think that person would have attended 1.
So there is a few things that make this a complete Fugazi and pointless. And it's because people invite and chill with a bar, right? And it will be completely different next season. So a top 125, looking at it now, makes no sense in terms of trying to create a number.
The one that you've already raised, Ben.
I think what I'm...
Top 22 race.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest comparison.
I think what I'm trying to mitigate is the conversation around, well, obviously if the person could attend 3 internationals and has the capacity to do so, they're obviously going to get their invite over me.
Well, they're more likely to.
But it doesn't stop you to. And also they were more likely to before. Like, you would be there with them, I suppose. which is like, is that a better feeling? I don't know if it is. Like, they'd be in day 2 probably, right?
Yeah.
Or I guess in this system it's only a buy, so it maybe feels better that you're. But also, like, I think it's right for Pokemon to reward the most dedicated players anyway, because I want them at the World Championships.
You have to put dedication.
And I'm not
like those who have the money to do it as well. So
sorry. I'm not disagreeing or agreeing with that comment,
yeah.
by the way. I'm not disagreeing or agreeing with that comment, by the way. I'm just raising it with both of you. But
No. It's absolutely fine, and it's something to be raised, right? Because people online will be talking about that point. That yes, you still have those players who can go to every tournament, and we have that person, for example, in the EU who does it. You know, there is someone in the US who has travelled to tournaments out of their region as well, and was able to clutch their invite. And congrats to them, and they've been able to do that. They will still probably get an invite at the very bottom of that 1-2-5. They'll have to fight hot tooth and nail for it. But they're still giving themselves the best opportunity to do it because they have the means to do so, whether they have the money, the time, etc.
Yeah,
that's on
we
them.
can't stop that. Like, we can't stop that. The only way you stop that is,
and you never will be able to stop it either, right?
the only way you stop that is with a play point cap, and that punishes aspiring, not so strong players way harder than people who will just go to everything.
I
so
agree. That is much.
If you want the sort of economic solution, you're actually punishing newer players way freaking harder. The only other thing I want to mention about lowering best finish limits is about locals and, like, will attendance be way lower if BFLs are way lower? And I think that completely depends on the season reward program that we talked about. If that's still there, locals will still go, and I actually think it'll be better as long as that program is solid. So I do not think that is going to be a concern for the local scene.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just simply because, I mean, we have the biggest range and variation in player numbers in the UK, I think, because of the sheer number of cups and type of tournaments that we have, because we've gone from the 40 to 50 to maybe even bigger cups to the 3 people cups or 4 people cups, and it's crazy because one, it could be timing, it could be the time of the year and etc. Or it could just be people actually just being done with the season, and that's what we need to try and figure out the best solution to. The rewards program is a step in the right direction towards that. But they need to get it right. That's the first thing. They could get it wrong, and we'll face the same.
I've put a lot on their shoulders. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, you are championing them for absolutely.
I really am.
You said they're spot on with everything.
You said there was going to be plushies. You said there was going to be.
I've promised so much.
I can't wait to put a plushie qualifier in my bio.
I feel like Keir Starmer right now. With all these promises.
Ooh, political.
So,
I mean, election is next week, right? Is it next week?
Yeah.
We'll update you on that. We'll screenshot our voting cards.
Who are you voting for?
Mine's done. I've postal voted. I've actually done.
Come on.
Get out of the way.
You've got to do it in person, surely.
I've never voted in person. Anyway, moving on. The only thing we haven't touched on, by the way, is that obviously regional winners get a automatic invite, and that person doesn't count towards the top 1-2-5.
Correct. So it's 1-2-5 plus. Yes.
So the change also is increased for ICs now as well. So it's not just the winner that gets an auto invite; it's top 4. Yes, ICs are massive, and there's only 4 out of the 3,000 plus to get an auto invite. Still an incredible achievement, but I think it's right for that kind of level.
Yep.
Very akin to the World Championships, where the top 4 get an auto invite back to Worlds as well. Great change. Just throwing out there as well, another good thing that they've thrown into the mix for this information drop as well.
Yeah. This one's just a pure win, and I think it, again, just highlights the strength of these tournaments and doing well in them, which is completely fine.
Yeah. Highlights Pokemon actually, potentially listening to a lot of these people and players. I mean, I think there's been a lot of positive changes off the back of the discussions, I shall say, that I've had.
I think the discussions actually came at the perfect time. The social media discussions actually came at the perfect time, because I think it was recent enough to be like actually in TPCI meetings probably about these topics have been raised, and I think it's absolutely perfect, to be honest with you. There are just some other really quick, easy wins. Is that there's more booster prizing at events. Priority Reg now as part of IC Travel Awards, which has been a hot topic.
I wonder if we'll still see the ones for the younger players that they had as a trial. It seemed like.
Yes.
Where they sent out those.
They do have an over/under 18 thing on their pivots thing, and priority regis for everyone. So that's part of their graph. Their graphs are so.
Okay. I mean,
their graphs are hard to follow, but yes.
It was very odd because it was almost like testing whether
Correct.
it worked for them, wasn't it, for one
Yep.
of the ICs.
That's exactly what it was.
Again, they were happy with it, and they're going ahead, which is great. The only other, I guess, positive that everyone is happy with is that the pricing structure is staying the same as well. We had that little scare of it, a typo that was like, that actually said we're keeping it the same, and then dropped it by $3,000, and everyone
Very
was like,
sneaky.
what am I going to do now? I can't make my money anymore.
Don't scroll down.
Crazy.
You don't have to. You don't have to scroll.
So that's again great news, because we know from the growth of the game and where it's gone, you know, the increases to Worlds to 50k, Internationals to 25, Regionals to 10. You know, these are massive amounts of money on the line for a hobby trading card game, which is, you know, an IP that we all know and love.
Yes.
The only other big change for our structures for day one, and this will count quite a lot for our broadcast and casting and commentary as well, is that we're going to the same format that was announced for the World Championships. So the day one and day two sort of Swiss tournament format has been adjusted now based on the rounds now actually being reduced, again, based on the number of participants. But they're reducing the total number of day one Swiss rounds, and then there's a day two Swiss round sort of add-on, almost, depending on the number of participants that are there. Kind of, for me, it's a bit of a strange one. You do still need to meet a day 2 points threshold, but then only playing potentially 2 rounds of Swiss in day two is a little bit odd. I mean, it's very unlikely because we're going to get bigger numbers anyway, so it's probably going to be 3 or 4, most likely the 4 number. But a really interesting change. I would have liked to have seen it work in practice at Worlds first, because there's a lot of mindset like shifting that's going to happen, because one, this takes away the impact. Well, it takes away the impacts. This kind of takes away ties as a massive factor, potentially in our structure going forward as well, because ties don't really do too much other than maybe the one that you could afford to have now. So there's a lot going on in the conversations and discussions that are happening in the social media world. Ben, are you happy with this change? Is less rounds potentially?
I think that's always good. More time to explore.
I thought you were serious, and I was panicking.
I think this is where most of my criticisms have come into it, though. I think I spoke to you, Joe, about it quickly before this. This is where tournament structure and the actual game itself doesn't quite compute. I think ties are a natural thing to happen in the game at the moment, especially with the game how it is. And you have to consider that. I mean, Joe, you were saying earlier, you know, this is definitely going to make a big impact as to what people are choosing to play, you know. And I was just thinking of it practically as an example.
For yourself, was it?
A Lost Box Mirror now sounds horrific, or any of those kind of archetypes which take a little bit of a while, and you probably are only going to get 2 games out of a best of 3. They seem really bad now, and this will make a large impact on tournaments and the type of decisions that people will make. I think just touching on that. Early ties will also be like tying just in general now is even worse than it was. I mean, Dave, you pressed upon it there. You know, you are allowed the 1 tie, fine. You know, for that 1 point to tip you over the edge. Now, if you get 2, I mean, we've discussed it before in the Worlds format. That's basically you're out. You know, you have to go X2 now. It's a lot of pressure on players now and it can get messy as well. It can get really messy, especially when you get into rulings and, you know, gentlemen's agreements and all that kind of thing. It's just, this is where most of my worry comes into this new structure. I think things will get a lot messier, or could get a lot messier, and it does tip into that player experience once again going into tournaments. You know, just I mean I I don't have to tell players to just don't tie. That's basically all I'm taking.
I mean, we started to get to that from a Worlds tournament anyway. During day one, we can't really afford to tie, and I believe a lot of players often just kind of put it up front, like we don't want to tie. Let's go to an agreement like immediately round one. I was stupid enough in the most recent Worlds to not do that anyway, just because I'm playing the game, and sometimes it's a bit awkward to kind of go down that direction. But I think by going to this system, and we haven't even touched on, again, what we've already spoken about for the world structure, the asymmetrical cuts, where if you get them the same number of points as the 8th place, you are placed into and up to a maximum of 32 players, you are placed in an asymmetrical cut where it's a single elimination bracket, which is really cool, a kind of throwback to previous years
like that
as well.
That's a simple one. We like bubble. We don't like to bubble. That's a simple 100%. One, right?
But the day 1 and day 2 structure that we're going to be having, I think leads itself potentially to seeing a change in our structure going forward in terms of times and ties and things like that. I think Pokemon will look at that at some stage, based on at least the first few tournaments. They might not make an immediate change, but I think they'll start to have a true impact, maybe where we might see a change to our time format going forward. Who knows? I'm throwing it out there. It's definitely something that I think needs to be considered based on that natural tie element. We have to look at other games, other card games where they don't actually like ties, or they don't. I think if you tie, you might actually take a loss in certain card games or certain formats.
Even in Japan.
Yeah,
Even in Japan.
Best of 2 format, whatever.
Double game loss.
Changed.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot to potentially look out for in the future with this system, I think.
Yeah, I think we have to give them credit in that they're only doing this like time save for a couple of reasons, and that like the time save in losing a round. And I have to think it's more than just like we get out of the venue half an hour earlier. I have to think it's more than that for like we think the overall player experience will be better if they leave in time to go to McDonald's before it shuts. I think it has to be that they're either giving us more time in rounds, or as you can see on the Swiss and Top Cut changes, the number of participants goes all the way down to 8,192.
Yeah,
so it could be that they are looking to have uncapped / just way higher capped tournaments in our season, and they're expecting just that there will be more lag time between each individual round because of the sheer number of participants. So that's a tell that they're thinking about the fact that they have the scope to have NAIC at 5,000. That could actually be the case, right?
I guess it definitely is a good point you've made there, because naturally, again, I'm seeing it from a business perspective where you can only increase the numbers based on what your historical data has told you. And that's kind of why we've gotten to the stage where we've seen some tournaments still struggle with like sort of that max cap, and people like, I'm throwing hands in the air because it's still too low. Look at last week. But you can't do that because you have to kind of plan in advance. We've just had NAIC pretty much at the 3,000 mark, right? That's already halfway of the next bracket of the 2,000 to 4,000. So it's only a small incremental change to get beyond that next threshold. So they have to start thinking about the 8,000. In their mind, probably maybe like that's a future problem. We'll if we ever get there, we'll think about that later. We'll still try and find ways to maybe hard cap at 4,000 and not
flights.
That 4,097.
Two 4,000 player flights, easy.
Yeah, right. But at least they're thinking about it, and that shows again a step in the right direction. I can't ever imagine we'll ever get to the stage of a 5,000 NAIC. Maybe right now. Yeah, it
Interesting.
Could happen,
okay, I mean,
I think you could.
That's fine.
I think it'll be nuts, and
well, even if that 5,000 is like a pipe dream, I think the fact that we have to take into consideration more frequent 2,000 player tournaments, Europe has only had like 1 or 2 over 1,000, right, outside of EUIC. The fact that it could frequently be going to 1,500 is an exciting prospect for this season. If it means we lose a round, I guess I take that just on average, that the fact that between rounds will take on average an extra like 15-20 minutes. So it's purely again logistics of us now having to accept larger tournament structure.
I mean, the reason why potentially that getting to that kind of figure of 5,000 and so on is they still need to figure out the other logistics of not just the venue itself, but the volunteers that we get as
Yes.
judges
Yes,
and all
yeah.
the support, and
I
there's so
agree.
much more that a lot of people don't seem to realize that go behind the numbers and the whole logistics of actually putting on a show. As far as I understand it, Pokemon will be happy to throw money at something, but you can't throw money at something when there's no one to do the job of a judge
Yes.
or things like that, right? That's the concern. But again, steps in a great in a good direction, and happy to see that sort of come, hopefully, to fruition one day.
Yeah, I think we all agree that less rounds is bad for the players right now, but we imagine this gives them scope to maybe do other things. Even if it means we can do a turn one search and flip our prizes, that could be the easy time save, baby. Come on.
I'll be eager to see whether they do have gameplay changes based on this, because, like you said, there has to be a reason, right?
I mean, I don't think it's anything drastic, like it's turning best of 3 to best of 2 or anything like that. I would be surprised, like certainly not this season. It would have been in the announcement.
I'm actually starting to rethink my point of actually maybe if they added 60 to go into 60 minutes as an example, but
yes,
when you
I think that's as likely.
Now I'm putting my hat on as a commentator or a caster. The number of rounds actually doesn't it increase potentially for us, because if we did say it's the 2048 limit and we hit 8 rounds day 1, fine, but day 2 Swiss rounds we've got that. And then we've also got the asymmetrical top cut.
It will likely be the same number. Yes, it will likely
to 8 to 4. You know, it actually.
Yeah. Asymmetrical in terms of the scale of the tournament, there will likely be one more round. Yes.
Right. Exactly. Which means in reality,
one more round for way less people.
Same. Yeah. Our job remains the same.
You're just worried about how many hours you're doing.
Yeah, I know. I was just about to say.
Look.
He's worried about what time he has to get up.
We missed like the first 2 rounds already.
Don't bring that up.
But we might not now because we have less rounds on day 1. It means we might be able to squeeze it in, right?
Certainly,
there's that potential. I'm just saying. We might have to
put that
work
down
harder.
as a maybe. Drop that down. I'm up for that.
Yeah. I mean, we always really enjoy it. I mean, I think it's always a miss that we don't get to show some of the craziness in maybe the first early rounds anyway. But, you know, we'll happily touch on that topic at a later time. Anything else on this? I probably have one more point before we start talking about some of the locations that were announced as well. But just in the general structure, how does everyone else?
Just to do with those locations, I think it's really important that there's almost a month gap between each regional /SPE within their own region. So I think it's going to be a much better feeling for even those people who are chasing their invite very rigidly, that it's not going to be like a 1 week gap and then you're back on a plane again and this, that, and the other. I think it's going to be much easier to leave, and I think it's going to be much easier to like have a life outside of the game just by having like 1 month gaps or 3 week gaps.
Mr. Bernard, sorry, hand up here, just trying to get your attention. We kind of don't. There's a 2 week gap between Lille and
that. I mean. Yes,
but
nominally month to month, there will be close gaps, but there's like, for example, there has definitely been like 1 week later, it's another US regional. You know, that's been on their calendar in the past. So, like, I think people will generally welcome the fact that it's typically 2/3+ week gaps, and I think that's not a surprise. It also means that if you are someone that wants to go abroad to travel to see a place, or like it just so happens to work out for you, or this, that, and the other,
you can better plan.
You can do that, get home, and then go to your next local regional as well. So
sleeping out of suitcase is quite difficult. Sometimes you did it for Bologna to NAIC, Joe. So
you do not want to smell that suitcase. I'll tell you that.
So, Ben, any other last thoughts before we actually do touch onto the actual locations and other announcements, like final announcements of this?
No.
From yourself, all good. The only other interesting thing I wanted to raise with both of you is, and we've spoken about it throughout the season, and it's always been quite an interesting point for me, is that we've started to see a lot of sets in Japan and over in the Western releases start to converge a little bit. Ooh, just smacked my mic.
Know where you're going with this. I love it.
So I think what we've always seen from a Western side is that Japan and other TPC regions were going to come over and join our structure in terms of like the point system or one way, shape or form. And I think what people haven't quite recognized is that maybe this convergence is actually maybe heading towards a bit more of their type of format as well. Or structure, I should say. And that's a really interesting dynamic. And again, it's another thing that we'll touch on because of the locations as well. And I just kind of wanted to throw that out there because I think it's a really interesting thing where we're starting to see more and more things just maybe align. The stars are aligning a little bit closer every season now. It might not happen this season, maybe not one more, but I think it's coming. I have a feeling it's coming.
Well, I also think specifically with EUIC dates, that's going to be a big thing in that we have a Feb EUIC, so it's very likely that we won't have this horrible, drawn-out zombie 6-month season where everyone's bored, even if the format's good, because it just went on for too long. I think it's very likely.
You've gone to that, by the way.
It's just a speculation. It's just a speculation, but it's very likely that we'll either be getting a new set or a rotation by Feb. In 2025, which I think is a massive freshen up. And I also think just date-wise, it makes more sense that it's more close to a calendar year in terms of rather than having like the back end of a season then being the thing that matters most for Worlds, when now it almost feels like half of your season will then be the new format so that like you can actually take the decks that you liked playing to earn the Worlds invite to Worlds. Whereas like when it's April or whatever, your favourite deck could have been in last format, it could have rotated, and then you can't even play the thing you were really good at playing. It's like, it's so weird. So that also feels way better.
We obviously saw the loss of OCIC, which happened usually in the February sort of time frame, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yep. This season we saw, that go and NAIC come a little bit earlier. So it kind of shortened the gap from Europe to NAIC, but now they've made this next change, and as hopefully Ben's showing, you've got Latin America International Championships in the similar sort of time frame of November time. EUIC now in February, which is almost like filling that gap between November to June.
Yes.
Again, giving that better sort of quarter, or maybe not quarter, but thirds. Actually, it's probably quarter because then we go into Worlds into August as well, maybe closer to that. But again, this is another important thing. So when we used to have it maybe sort of first or second week of April, having it 6 weeks before, what's the sort of release time of sets from Japan to the western side? And that's where we're starting to see potentially that conversion. Again, making a lot of assumptions.
Speculation.
But and speculation. But this is a really cool thing that we might start to see.
I'll put an asterisk in the comments or something.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. We can only
I agree.
much, right?
I agree.
But really cool. So that's been announced, which Joe's obviously very happy about. Something he said at the very start of this pod as well. You know, just having things like these big tournaments up front is fantastic to see, and it's something we're starting to get a lot more information from Pokemon now. You know, last year we saw the start of the kind of first half of tournaments come out at NAIC. This time, a little bit later, but, you know, they've given us even more information because they've got all these structures and changes. But it's fantastic. So, Sao Paulo again, going back to London, home city, let's go. And then New Orleans, which I absolutely loved. I'm actually considering maybe even going back if I get the opportunity to. Lots of tournaments to talk about. And then, of course, the regionals up until Christmas have been announced. Rab, how do we feel about that?
Yeah, happy with the locations. I love a German regional, just for the food in general.
Especially around December time.
Yeah, and that as well. Yeah, Lille
was
as well.
Was that this month?
I was in my Christmas jumper, so yeah.
It would have been.
Santa Claus.
Lille as well, very consistent.
All of our locations are the same, right?
So far,
more than happy. And Gdansk as well. Happy with that. Yeah. Happy with that choice as well. A lot of people were hoping to change it to Warsaw because people seem to really enjoy these Polish regionals, which is great. That they're continuing to support that. But happy to go to Gdansk again. It was great.
I haven't gone through the fine-tooth comb for the NA or LA of like which are new and which are old. That's the one thing that I'm sort of lacking. But seeing Brazil, Peru, Argentina, Colombia is pretty cool.
Is that pretty new? Because we don't usually see the SPEs too early, right?
That sounds more varied.
Yeah. The only
they had to sandwich so much into one format because they didn't have enough tournaments in the year, and then it was all like backlogged to like still give them a chance to earn points. So at least LA can be happy. OC again. There's nothing. there is literally nothing this year for them. So OC
They
can
only
feel
won 20 of
aggrieved.
them after all, so
Yeah, 20 people are upset. So what? You know.
they'll come over. It's fine. We've got
So
Mr.
what? It's only
Worldwide
20
Jonathan
20
coming
people.
over.
I'm not,
It's 20
I'm not
people.
condoning this.
Yeah,
We've got to have some
OC
fun
again.
eventually, Rab. Come on now. we can't just
OC
talk
feels
to
bad, but at least LA can feel much happier about the state of things compared to last season.
Great.
So that's great, and it seems like it's going to be way more countries, so it's going to feel more similar to our circuit in Europe, where we're actually going to new destinations and experiencing different cultures and all of that, which I think is exciting for
I
LA
kind of
players.
feel like they probably have had them in those 4
They have.
areas
They-
so far.
I think they have.
I'm pretty sure they did towards the end of last. Or
It's more,
last season,
yeah.
not this season. But it's more.
It's
that they
more
spread
that
it
they're
out and
sandwiched.
early.
Yeah. So typically they're so sandwiched that like you have to go to like 1 or 2 of them as the LATAM players, or again it's those like day 2 chasers that would go to everything and then their month is ruined. Now it feels much more of a healthy balance for everyone that hopefully also improves their attendance at all of these tournaments
I
as well.
wonder if we'll still see for the next half, like the 2 South African SPs back-to-back weekends again in June just before, which is always a bit crazy. But
yeah, I mean the fact that there's so much attention to detail for the event schedule of this calendar year, I think that they're way more on top of it this season. I think they're starting to get that completely nailed down.
Yeah.
So again, it's just more positives from everyone apart from OC.
so just a reminder for our EU friends. So our first tournament within EU is in Dortmund. We're going back to Westfalenhallen on September 28th. We go to then Lille, if I'm not mistaken, in October. We then go to Gdansk again with that wonderful stadium that's opposite of sort of venue, which has got that really sort of golden sort of. I think it was a football stadium.
I can't remember what it was called.
I think it might just be called the Amber. Yeah.
Amber Expo.
Hence the Amber Expo.
Oh right. I don't have it on my graphic.
And then,
I'm using my own
back
spreadsheets
to-
What was the stadium? It was Legia Gdansk. It was a massive stadium, wasn't it? It was huge.
It was really, really cool. It was just outside the venue.
It was
and then,
snowing
of
as
course,
well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was one
I'm
where
sure
we
it
had
was.
to get the tram and walk back, which was good fun. I don't
That
think
was
it
an
was too.
We were like
experience.
that. We were like that.
We
On
were
the
pretty
tram.
squashed up
On the
that tram as
train.
well.
Yeah.
And then back to your Cloth Stuttgart, which again is one of those venues which is kind of oddly pricey to try and get to Stuttgart, but then you're just there at the venue straight away because the venue's outside the airport, which is really cool.
Very convenient. I'll take it for the convenience, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people do it then.
Always try and go there a couple of days earlier, because if you can catch the Christmas markets, they're great.
Yeah.
They are really,
because
really
that
good.
Or just do poorly and go Sunday. That's fine
Yeah.
too.
Did we do that? Did I do that? Did I go? I can't even remember anymore.
You
It's
don't
so
really-
long ago.
you-
Oh no,
you
I
might
did
only-
do badly.
you might only
Stuttgart
you might only be
was
playing
my
2
one
games.
regional I didn't get points at. There you go.
Straight to the market.
Yeah.
Little hot chocky to tide you
was-
over.
Nah, it's the curry verse.
Hot chocky and a
curry
curry
verse.
and
I've
a
got-
big old slab of sausage.
I had Harriet learn how to make currywurst. I told you that, didn't I?
There you go. New
Did you?
skills.
Yeah. I said, I love a currywurst.
Is this what you do to pregnant women? Get them in the
Yeah.
kitchen? You're terrible.
No, it's out of love. My love language is
Of currywurst.
Yeah.
It's out of love of currywurst.
Yeah.
Good.
But
Right,
yeah,
I think
that's
is that everything?
I think that's covered everything that's dropped today. Obviously, there's a lot of information. Just a caveat in italics underneath the regional says dates, locations, formats subject to change, which is always a worry. But
Everything.
generally they don't. But they have to put that just to
Yeah,
make
they have
sure
to. They have to.
anything
caveat.
happens. If suddenly Eurovision pops up in another location that they've booked and signed up for again, and then they have to move to the next city over, like I think had to happen. They have that kind of capture all. But it's really cool. Lots of information to take in. Anything else, boys? Any last thoughts? Any final bits? Anything you don't want to put in your own channel, Joe, that you want to say now?
I'm just happy to be free. I'm free of the shackles of a World's Invite, and I can enjoy my life. It's great. While still attending, while still going to all the tournaments I would have gone to anyway, but it just feels different.
Play tier 3 decks without feeling guilty.
You're allowed to play tier 3. It's so fun.
Yeah.
You're whipping out Quackquaville.
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 Nah, Festival's my new when you won.
Festival lead,
Yeah.
Diplin.
You jumping on that masterclass? I think it's banding around.
Why are you laughing?
Wait,
That's
Why
what
exactly?
weird.
You might. It'll give
Wait.
you some
You
information
raised
how to
it.
play at cups.
Why are you laughing though?
Oh,
Yeah. You are the worst.
I am the worst.
I was just giving you more information. I was trying to help you. We're trying to help you again. Are you going to leave this chat as well? I can't believe it.
I'm gonna.
Can't believe it.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Disconnect.
Honestly.
Right. Okay.
Can you edit for me now?
I think we should leave that there, as Ben's just going to run off again. But thank you very much for listening. Make sure you give us your views as well. I guess comment on YouTube, comment on, I think Spotify, you can do that. Don't know if Apple Podcasts can. Or even just message under Joe's tweets, because you know how outspoken he is on
Just PM
Twitterverse.
Joe.
Can't help myself.
Just message Joe directly.
But honestly,
He-
if we're being too positive on something and you see more negatives from like your perspective or this, that, and the other, I actually want to hear those perspectives because they're not what I'm. They're just not in my field of vision right now. So I genuinely want to hear like positive, negative, indifferent feedback for how it affects your season going forward, or how you feel about the structure in general. Compare it to other TCGs if you have that background. That would be cool as well. I just want to hear more and more information and insight from everyone else to sort of see the overall experience, because I'm in my own bubble right now. So getting more opinions is always good to read through, I think.
100%, yeah, and we love a bit of engagement. So yeah, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, Alex, myself, Joe, Ben. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll speak to you soon.
Bye.